Could you imagine if I created these videos with no end goal in mind? Or if I had an end goal, but I had no idea how I would get there and what I would teach you in the process from beginning to end? And instead, I would just rely off of elaborate turns of phrases with poetic meaning and meandering paragraphs of inconsistent thought as I rambled into the abyss of nothingness, hoping you would just like the sharpness of my tongue as I droned on and on and on. Well, that's what your book would look like if you didn't plot properly. And that's the story of today's video. Let's get started. What's up, everybody? I'm back. Dillon here, former best-selling author of nonfiction books such as Breaking the Charts and The Happiness Gap, and current co-creator of a series of fictional comics called The Tales of Bestunia in the Unfound Adventure series, which is now turning into a collaborative space that will house a series of novels, origin stories, children's books, and more. And I'm here today with selfpublishing.com to talk all things plotting for you fiction authors. How to plot your book properly and how to make sure that you have structure that allows you to bring out the magic of your writing in between the lines of a good fiction outline. Today, we're going to talk about how we plot in our Unfound Adventures universe, whether it's through comics, children's books, or our novels that are coming out. We're going to talk all things plotting, which is going to entail the 5 main plot points of any good fiction story and how we use it in our books, common themes to make sure you're looking out for while you plot, and how to properly fill in the gaps while writing your book out within the plot. And we'll talk about how you can use this to collaborate with partners such as illustrators, editors, or cover designers. But before we get started, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe, specifically if you are liking this content. If you're getting anything of value, make sure you like, subscribe, comment what you're learning in these videos, and share it with a friend if you need to. Let's continue to grow the self-publishing world. That being said, let's get started. Now, before we get into the 3 main points of today's video, we should probably talk why plotting. Why is plotting so important? For those of you out there that might not know this, there's really 2 different types of fiction writers out there: plotters and pantsers. Some of the best plotters in the world, one that always comes to mind, James Patterson, plots out his book, not only the 5 main plot points we're going to talk about today, he plots out his book chapter by chapter before he writes, and also gets as intricate as paragraph by paragraph before giving his plot off to a team of writers. He's one of the biggest known plotters in the fiction world. He's on one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is what we call pantsers, people that write and fly by the seat of their pants. One of the best known pantsers out there is Stephen King. If you ever read his books, you can tell he's just taking you on this elaborate journey with turns of phrase as you read, as you continue to flip the pages. Here's the challenge of being a pantser early in your fiction writing career: is we're still young to the process. We're still learning this process as we walk this journey of being a fiction author. And if we start this by just pantsing everything we write, we run into the potential challenges of plot holes. Nobody wants them, but when we're writing and just seeing what comes to us in the moment, a lot of times we lose track of where we're going, or even more importantly, where we've been. And it really can hurt your credibility as an author. So what I'm going to get to in this video is there's not going to be somebody out there that's 100% a plotter, 100% a pantser. But early on in your fiction career, it's better to lean towards order and have pillars to hold your book up that allow you to pants in between than just starting right from the jump with a flow of consciousness with fingers crossed, hoping for the best. That being said, let's get into the best practices of how you can use plotting as a good tool in your arsenal in your writing journey. So let's start with how to properly plot your book and which plot points you can use to stem off of. Now, there are a bunch of different frameworks out there that teach you how to plot. So of course, I'm going to recommend, if you are someone that likes this, go do your research. See what is out there that really speaks to you. Maybe it's me, maybe it's not. One of the really good frameworks out there is the steps of the hero's journey, put together by the great Joseph Campbell. He's one of my favorite nonfiction authors. I love The Power of Myth. I love The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And Joseph Campbell looks back on these mythologies and these great heroes of mythology, and he found these common themes of the great stories that we've heard in the past. Stories of Hercules, stories of Homer's Odyssey. And he could see a similar journey that these heroes would walk in order to teach these lessons to readers that have lasted now generations and generations and generations, and have spoke to the next generation through the power of allegory, right? Hidden meanings or hidden lessons that we can find within a story, song, or phrase, right? That's what Joseph Campbell found in mythology, and he outlined this hero's journey in a number of books that he did. But you can Google hero's journey Joseph Campbell to see the steps that most of these heroes follow, and you can use them for your protagonist in your fiction book. But for the sake of today's video, we're going to be working off of the Great Ones framework. Rami Vance, who is the head of fiction at Self-Publishing School, he's a big mentor and friend of mine. He's helped me construct my books. He's tore them down. He's helped me build them better. And he has taught me some of the frameworks that I will be teaching you today. The most important one being the 5 main plot points of any good fiction book, story, or movie. My wife hates me at times because she'll be reading her book and I could see by where she's at in the book which plot point is going to come up. And I tell her, hey, get ready to get your heart broken. Probably going to happen in the next 10% of that book, or I'll bring it up during movies. It is a framework that you will see time and time again, and you can use for yourself to make sure you are writing the best possible fiction book. Let's dive in. All right, let's start out with the 5 key plot points of any good fiction story. Feel free to take notes. You can pause this video and start it whenever you want, or keep everything up here in the old cranium. Either way, let's dive in. The first plot point we need to make sure we cover when writing a good fiction story is we need to set the scene, which in layman's terms basically means if I am airdropped into your story that you are writing or telling, where the hell am I? Am I in modern times, right? Is this a contemporary fiction of just modern times? Am I someplace in history? Is this a historical fiction? Am I not on this planet at all, right? Is this going to be more of a fantasy or a sci-fi? And to help understand that, am I going to start to see magic in this world? More of a fantasy? Or am I going to start to see a bunch of tech and a bunch of robots and wires and all of this? Is this going to be more of a science fiction? So in the first 5 to 10% of the book, I need to know, where the heck am I, right? The first thing we want to properly do is set the scene. And with that, we want to introduce the main characters to the story. Who is the protagonist? Who is the potential secondary or side character? We might even see a tertiary character early on. You don't always have to see antagonists early, but in your story, if that is important to set the scene, make sure you do that in the first 5 to 10% of your book. That is plot point number 1. Plot point number 2 is the most vital scene you will write in your book, at least your first book, and that is what we call the inciting incident. This is going to be an incident, a scene that sets the main character on his or her overall quest. It's something that once this scene happens, the main character cannot go back. Their life is forever changed. In our book, The Tales of Bestunia, where every person is born with a spiritual beast called their calling that represents their life path or their life's calling, the main character, Joan, is born without a beast. She's born in a time where nobody is getting callings because the god that gifts these callings is lost. And when she turns 13, 14, in the very first chapter, at the end of it, she is not only gifted a spiritual calling, but she is actually gifted the lost God himself. And it is on her to get him back to his rightful place in the world so order can come back to Bestunia, right? Once that happens, her life is forever changed. And her journey, her quest has now started. So ask yourself, what is the inciting incident? And what does that look like for an external journey for the main character? Get the god back to his home, the top of the mountain in Bestunia. And what is the internal journey, which is Joan, who's lived her whole life not knowing what her purpose is suddenly thrusted into the most important calling in this world, and she doesn't know how to wrestle with that, right? The stubborn part of her wants to know her calling for herself, but life has thrown her a curveball that has shown her what she's destined to do. This is going to play a constant theme throughout the stories. That's the second plot point you're going to want to ask yourself. What is your inciting incident that your protagonist will go through where his or her life will never be the same? And then they're going to start their way on the journey. And this is where they're going to have progression. They're going to train. They're going to get better. They're going to learn from mentors. They're going to make progress throughout this story. They're going to feel good about themselves until plot point number 3 comes, which is slap number 1. It is where your character has been making progression and all of a sudden they slam back down to earth. They pull out their shovel, they dig 6 feet deeper, and they're stuck there. There is an instance that happens that rips them down back to reality. It humbles them immensely. And part of you, as the reader is reading this and you're asking yourself, are they ever going to get up? Is this over? Right? It's this hopeless moment that you want to give your main character, right? What is going to happen in your book that's going to crush, and we almost think cripple, this main character, right? In a lot of romances we see, it's like they start to progress in this love story and then all of a sudden something happens and they split, they break up, and they're like, they're never going to get back together. Plot point number 3 is what we call slap number 1. What's going to happen after that is your main character is going to get up after they go through the depths of hell. They're going to get up, they're going to brush themselves off, and they're going to slowly progress again. They're going to start to find themselves. They're going to start to become stronger because they went through it. They're working their way through these challenges to learn the valuable lesson to get to the end of this story, right? And they start to rise again. They start to rise again, and they get close to the end of this story. And in plot point number 4, we call this slap number 2. It's right before the end, the climax, which we'll get to next, where you really feel like the main character is about to get there, and they get shot down to reality again. It's this lost hope in a sense, but there is a glimmer of hope in this one. Whereas plot point number 3 is they were rocked and they dug 6 feet deep and they're stuck there. This time they get rocked, but they've learned enough between plot point number 3 and plot point number 4 to pick themselves up quicker, to have that resilience, and to get to plot point number 5, which is the climax of the story. And the climax of the story states the inciting incident, was it solved or was it not solved? The inciting incident which kicked off this story needs to be solved by the climax, or it needs to be solved enough for now to leave a cliffhanger to get us to continue to read the next book, right? We're going to have a climax for our book as well as a climax for our series. So ask yourself, what is the inciting incident if this is a standalone book, and what's the climax if it's a standalone book? And if it's going to be a series, what's the inciting incident and what can be a climax for now in book number 1, but will keep us reading to the end climax at the end of the series? Those are your 5 key plot points. Now, the second thing I want to talk about, once you have your 5 plot points, is you have your pillars that is going to hold up or be the foundation for your story, right? The second thing we want to talk about now is starting to ask yourself a common theme for your story that you're telling. My partner Matt and I are creating an origin novel. He is actually creating an origin novel for our comics universe, right? We have the main story that we're writing right now, The Tales of Bestunia, that features Joan, but we're going to have an origin novel, which is a written fiction novel, right? And with that, we're going to talk about the savior of the world, right? The early savior, the early Moses, in a sense, of the world of Bestunia. And with this, he has this inciting incident of becoming separated from his own calling early on. And we want a climax that can help solve it. So Matt and I talked, for weeks on what is this common theme that we're really trying to shine a light on. And it's this theme of kind of the opposite of our main character, Joan, in our comic. Argus, our main character of our novel, goes through feeling like he knows what his purpose and his calling is with his spiritual beast and becoming separated from it and losing himself through that separation and not knowing if he's ever going to get that back, right? It's this story of becoming separated and then finding yourself again. It's a common theme that takes time. And this is what I would recommend for you is take time to find the common theme of your story. Give yourself time to be philosophical. And in this part of the process, finding the common theme, what I really recommend is be patient and allow yourself the freedom to be wrong, to have a bad idea, to brainstorm and say, ooh, it could be this, it could be, actually, no, that's not it. It's okay to spend time with this. Matt would actually fly up to see me. He used to live in Michigan where I live, and we would take time and walk throughout my hometown. We walked along the beach and we just discussed the meaning and the theme of our story. It's important to take time here because it will make your story that much more deep as you write it and as your reader reads it, right? Because you want the plot points of your story to come back to this common theme, not just your climax, but your slap one and your slap two as well. How can your slap one be a huge moment that shakes up your main character to the inciting incident that put them on their quest? The inciting incident for Argus of being ripped away from his calling and losing himself, we want that to be hammered home on the importance of it in slap one. He's going to start to get closer. He's going to start to build that connection back to his calling in this world, and he's going to get rocked, and he's going to second guess if it's worth it, and he's going to pick himself up and learn again. So having a common theme that can exist between your 5 key plot points is crucial. Give yourself time to think and brainstorm what that could be. Now, finally, the third thing I want to talk about when it comes to plotting your book is how to fill in the gaps of your 5 key plot points, right? We've already discussed that your 5 key plot points and this common theme are the brick and mortar that hold up the foundation of your story. It gives us a bit of order before we can get chaotic and fill in the gaps, right? And for those out there that are the nerds that want to know the analytics of it all, typically your inciting incident comes 5 to 10% into your book. Your slap one comes anywhere between 40 to 60% through your book. Slap two will come anywhere between 70 to 90% of your book. And then the climax and the wind down or the cliffhanger to the next book is going to be the last 10% typically. So once you have these pillars, your job is to fill in the space in between. Now, if you're a full pantser and you say, okay, now I just want to go and I want to exist between one plot point to the next, go ahead and start writing. If you'd like a little bit more structure, I would recommend what we call the and then model, which is as you start to picture, this is what I do. I love to plot. As I start to picture the chapters of our comic, I like to start with a scene and say, we open this chapter meeting Joan as the alarm wakes up. We're in her room. I write all this down. We're in her room and we see a power to no beasts picture on the wall. She wakes up in a daze, coming out of a memory, coming out of a dream, coming out of a nightmare is really what it is. And I write this out and then I go one line down. I typically bullet point this. I go one line down and I write, and then, and I fill in the blank. And then Joan hits the buzzer of her alarm, immediately pops out of bed, and we see that she has a metal leg. And then, one line down, she jumps on the ground and starts going through her morning routine of push-ups and sit-ups. And then she looks at herself in the mirror and she reminds herself that she's the best and today is going to be an amazing day. And then she leaves her room to come downstairs to see and hear her dad in the other room. We see this scowl on Joan's face as she looks towards her dad. And then she makes herself breakfast. And it's a light way to plot chapter by chapter between your plot point. This gives us a little bit more structure before we finally write our book. Or if you're writing comics, storyboard it before you give it to your illustrator. So feel free, if you need a bit more order, take time with this and go through chapter by chapter and use the and then model. Those are the 3 main points I want to give you when it comes to plotting your book properly. So a few final reminders. There's going to be no one that is 100% plotter or 100% pantser. Your story and your structure will have its ebbs and its flows. My job is just to provide you a structure that you can use if need be to help give you some order along the journey so you can be chaotic in between these plot points. Have fun with the chaos. See what unfolds along the way. And you can also use this order to collaborate with a team. Matt and I and our illustrator Evan, we use this plotting structure to bounce ideas off of each other, hold each other accountable, and make sure we don't have any plot holes throughout our story. You, if you're doing this by yourself, can use your plot points with your editing team or any illustration team that you might have or a cover design team. Most importantly, you want to use it with your editors so they can see where the story is going. So as they read, they can help you with some potential plot hole red flags that they see. Or they can even give you ideas to foreshadow in your book. Say, hey, this is a great job. This could be a great opportunity to foreshadow what you want to set up with slap number 1 or slap number 2. So use this to collaborate with your team. So thanks for joining us today. I know today's video was a little bit longer, but hopefully you got something out of it. If so, tell us in the comments, what was your biggest takeaway? Or let's play a game. What is an inciting incident or a slap number 1 or a slap number 2 or a climax from your favorite book, story, movie, whatever? Drop it below. Let's have some fun. I'll make sure and comment back to most of them that I see. I enjoy reading through them. Thank you so much. Make sure you like and subscribe as well. And if you need a little bit of help, if you need a sounding board when it comes to ensuring that your plot points are in a good place and your fiction story is set up for success, feel free to speak to my buddy Matt Seitz on the selfpublishing.com strategy team, and you can talk about your fiction book today and see what he has that can help you, or see if there's anything selfpublishing.com has to help you. Matt Seitz is incredible, and he's one of our co-collaborators in the Unfound Adventure world. He is creating his own series using the 5 key plot points for his series of novels that he will be using in the world of Bastunia. I will make sure to put his booking link below. It's a totally free call. Tell him I say hello. And remember, as you do all of this, this process will not be perfect. This process is not supposed to be perfect. Creation is not supposed to be perfect. Until I see you next time, happy writing.